Thank you, Joe. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a program on degrowth, a better global quality of life with less production. This is being sponsored by the Green Party of St. Louis and the Green Party of Missouri. I want to welcome you. My name is Kim Sipes. I'm a member of LaPio, the Labor Education Project on AFL-CIO Foreign Policy, and I want to welcome you. I'm going to say a couple of things, and then we will get started. So, to get us going, let's start with this statement. People everywhere are we're getting different things. All right. People everywhere are asking if degrowth is the only realistic way to counter climate change. But how could that happen? Would people have their jobs and be impoverished in the US and across the world? Or would it be the only way for poor countries to free themselves from overdeveloped ones? Degrowth means one's increasing necessities in the poor world, while two, decreasing unnecessary production in the rich world. What are the necessities? What is useless and destructive production? How can we teach children to appreciate people more than things? What does it mean to ration embodied fossil fuels? Some interesting questions. We've got quite a program tonight. We're going to hear from four people. Ajamu Baraka, Don Fitz, Alice Green, and Stan Cox. Each of them will speak for about 10 minutes. I'll introduce each of them as we start. Afterwards, we will have a number of speakers. The first one gets a little extra time because she's got some advanced expertise, and then everybody will get about 3 minutes to speak. Once those are done, and we check to make sure no one's come in late, then we'll go and open it up to the floor, and we'll go and see how we're doing. So that's basically the layout of the program. I think you're going to find it an interesting program, and we might as well get started. So I'm going to first ask Ajamu Baraka of the Black Alliance for Peace, and he was the 2016 Green Party vice presidential candidate, to start us off. Okay, Ajamu, if you would, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kim. And I'd like to thank Don and all the organizers for this very important discussion. I feel a little bit out of my depth here. There's so many people who are part of this conversation who are much more grounded in this issue than I am. But Don, who asked me to be a part of this and to discuss what I thought about what's needed by the peoples in the core nations of the North as it relates to this question of growth. And I'm going to attempt that because when Don will ask me to do something, I definitely always attempt to respond. So let me just get right into my prepared comments, and I'm hoping that it's going to be comprehensive and Don will approve. But we talk about the needs of the colonized peoples and the core nations of the North. And basically what we talk about is that the peoples of the North, they want human rights and dignity. Those goods and services that constitute a life of dignity, but also a life project that addresses the existential threats to collective humanity created by the 500-year-old colonial capitalist project that began with the invasion of what became the Americas in 1492, is a real threat to ability to live a life of dignity. The description of the life projects of peoples in what became the global South was not just a disruption of the ways in which people sustained themselves materially, but the imposition of a colonial capitalist model framed as modernity extracted a serious cultural price from the peoples brought under their control. The alienating values of the West disconnected peoples from nature and justify productive processes that produce the ecological, social, and economic crisis that collective humanity faces today. Production for profit and not for use, tore people from the land and made whole populations superfluous and therefore killable. Like what happened in the settler colonial project called the United States and contemporarily in Israel, Palestine. But colonial capitalist production also tore people from their indigenous lands to other lands, like what occurred with the transatlantic trade in human beings. In both the core nations of the North and the South, capitalist modernity, especially in its monopoly stage, produced urban centers that served as depositories of surplus populations from surrounding rural territories, creating mega cities of poor and displaced peoples. In the South, the problem of displacement is even more insidious because so many people are unable to be absorbed into the capitalist market, even at the lowest levels. The result being the majority of populations being confined to the informal sectors, barely etching out a living. Not surprising then, in the core nations of the global North, the populations crave the same things as the super exploited populations of the global South. Peace, access to food, environments free of pollution, clean water, access to healthcare, education, and a means to live, and a means to make a living through employment or access to land. Control over their political lives and the dignity of making decisions about their political and material lives. In other words, democracy. These basic human rights have been denied in those nations that have committed themselves to capitalist development and define themselves as developed based on national income and GDP metrics. Yet in the core nation of the United States, the nation that is supposed to be the richest nation on the planet, over 1 million people died, most unnecessarily, from a virus called COVID that was contained and successfully resisted in nations like China, Cuba, and most other nations pursuing different development models, not completely controlled by a capitalist ruling class, only interested in what can make money. So the peoples of the world are experimenting, asking questions and attempting to build innovative approaches to the issue of development. What has been apparent is production for profit has not worked. The degrowth movement is one of those efforts to move away from the capitalist growth model. The rejection of growth without human development has been growing, linking up activists from the global South and the North, and particularly in the South where most of the most innovative theories are developing. In the global South, there is a growing rejection of production models that duplicate the logic of development that does not center the needs of the people and planet first. It challenges the assumptions of modernity from the left and right that tend to center the production of the material base as a prerequisite for realizing the good life. The good life being defined as profits and riches for capitalists and socialism for poor nations and the poor. Degrowth, therefore, is a direct challenge to that logic. From the hoods in the North to the rural areas of the global South, it is clear that the existing models of production and exchange are not sustainable. But it is equally necessary to understand the fundamental differences that exist between the North and the periphery nations. Reduced production and consumption in the North are necessary but to ask national and comprador classes that administer nations in the South on behalf of capital to reject growth will be a challenge if informed by a misconception of common structural and political realities. The false promise of growth is alive and well. BRICS is Exhibit A. If eco-socialism is one of the answers to how we approach the ecological and productive crisis, it remains essential that its proponents have an approach to what it would take to win eco-socialism beyond a strategy that suggests anything other than defeat of the global capitalist class. There's no amount of persuasion or deal-making that would substitute for the necessity of winning power and dismantling the system that produced the contradictions that we will discuss this evening. That's my contribution, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, Ajamu. Very nice talk to get us going. By the way, folks, I forgot to mention that this program is being recorded. So later on, when we get to questions, please don't ask or say anything that you don't want circulating around the internet. So my apologies for not getting that out first, but I want to say it now. So thank you, Ajamu. All right, next we're going to turn to Don Fitz. Don is the outreach coordinator for the Green Party in St. Louis. He will address obscene overproduction in colonizing countries. Don, go ahead, please. Can't hear you, Don. Don.
I didn't want to talk over Ajamu, so I muted. Okay, I want to start off saying that when we hear the word underdeveloped countries, that gives the idea that poor countries will go through the same process that rich countries will if they just wait more and develop more. And this is something which is totally false. The reason that rich countries became rich is by plundering poor countries so that they could have economic growth. And that means the first goal of degrowth needs to be changing the debt that poor countries owe to the International Monetary Fund and other bodies. That needs to be changed to reparations, where rich countries are paying poor countries back for 500 to 600 years of exploitation. We've all heard the phrase climate change denial. Joe, could you show slide 2 up there? Climate change denial. But what we do, okay, there's one, and there we got, okay. So here's climate change denial, a good illustration of it. But I'd just like to say that energy denial is basically the same thing, because a lot of people will deny the very negative effects of solar, wind, hydro, and nuclear power. And climate change is critically important, but looking at only climate change itself means there's a failure to see that it's a symptom of capitalist exploitation and overproduction. And even with alternative energy, we still have a 3% growth rate per year, which means the economy doubles every 25 years and increases 16-fold in a century, and the world cannot handle that for another century. So how can we decrease production? Okay, Joe, could you put on image 3? Okay. Current production of the rich world is largely destructive, wasteful, and unnecessary. Now, there I am, if you haven't seen me before. Barb, my wife, took this a couple of days ago, New Year's Eve. This is my favorite shirt. I bought this shirt when I was 17 years old, and I've been wearing it for 58 years. And it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that 58 years ago, the clothing industry knew how to produce clothing that would last for 58 years. The average person in the US purchases 5 times as many garments in 2020 as it did in 1980. So this is just one minor way that things are way out of control in the rich world. We could just redesign all communities so that people can make 80% of their trips by walking or bicycling, and the rest by carpooling or car sharing. We could produce vastly less meat. We could have local agriculture, so food would not have to be traveled 2,000 miles. 50% of food is wasted. That could be changed. Just think what would happen if we reduced a lot of the toxic chemicals in the productive process. That would mean there would be vastly less medical treatment from cancers and all other diseases that are a result of poisons. in our bodies. Right now, people do not have the right to repair and reuse their commodities. Many things are being transferred to artificial intelligence so that only the corporation that produced it can fix it. We have enormous amounts of single-use disposables, plastic bags, plastic bottles, which used to be banned by the environmental movement in their meetings. Now they're everywhere. IKEA is infamous for having disposable furniture. Americans have by far the largest homes in the world, except for Australia. And we could have buildings that were constructed to last for over 100 years instead of 30 to 35 years like they do now. Joe, could you give me image 4? We've all heard about Greta Thunberg's, not driving on airplanes, and they've talked about this for years and done absolutely nothing about it. We could get rid of private banking, insurance, and advertisements. All of these would reduce our production enormously. Could you give me image 5? This is one of the books that I think everybody, if you're not familiar with degrowth, you really ought to read it. It's by Jason Hickel. Another one which is very good is by Schmelzer. Give me slide 6. Schmelzer and others have read that book. 2 nights ago, I went over all of my notes from that book, and there's something that's left out of everything that I said about how we could have degrowth. And that is, I don't think Jason Hickel mentions militarism at all. And in this book by Schmelzer and others, there's a very brief mention in 1 or 2 sentences, a couple of places in the book. There's really nothing more important for degrowth in the Western world, especially the United States, than a vast reduction of militarism. Now, what is left out of these discussions that we could reduce? More than anything else is the ideas of the people. There's 7 billion people on the planet. The things that I just listed are a small portion of things that could be reduced. We could reduce vastly more. And we need to look at the creativity of people and coming up with ideas, but also we need to look at the creativity of workers. Working people should themselves be the people who decide how production is going to be reduced without threatening anybody's jobs. Okay, could you give me image 7? So I'm sure everybody recognizes Greta Thunberg. I think the most famous thing, the thing that she said that I like more than anything else is blah, blah, blah. And she does an excellent job of talking about how these international conferences to talk about climate change do absolutely nothing. They're a bunch of do-nothing politicians and the corporations they represent coming in and pretending to do things and not doing anything at all. Instead, let's look at slide number 8. There's lots of histories. If you recognize this from 60 years ago, this is the Breakfast for Children program of the Black Panther Party, had free clinics, sickle cell anemia screening, and Breakfast for Children programs is just some of the things they did with solidarity networking. Today, the African People's Socialist Party has continued this tradition with basketball courts, bakery, women's clinics, just as some of the things that's being done in building self-sustaining communities. And these are a tiny minority of things that are happening in the globe. 3 million co-ops exist in the world. That's 12% of humanity, and it's jobs for 10% of the global workforce. Now, how could these changes come about? Well, let's just think some of the history that is left out of the degrowth discussion. If you've ever read socialist literature, you know about the Paris Commune in 1871. You might know about the St. Louis Commune in 1877. You might know about workers seizing control of factories during World War I and after, especially in Russia, Italy, and Germany. Okay, let's look at image 9. This book, if you haven't read it by Gaston Laval, is absolutely wonderful. He talks not just about the working class seizing control of production in Barcelona and Madrid, but he talks about the communes that were set up in rural Spain and how people governed their own lives and supported each other. During the Vietnam War, you can remember that a demand for social change was enormous, with millions and millions of people opposing that oppression. Let's look at image 10. And this, you might have forgotten about this was the 50-year anniversary of the overthrow of Allende. But during the Chilean Revolution of the early 1970s, after Allende was elected, people seized control of factories, and they had what was called cordones industriales, where workers in different factories would link together mutual self-support systems. Okay, we just in September we saw the UAW for the first time in almost a century coming up with the idea of a shorter work week, and this has largely been off the union scale for a long time. Okay, look at image 11, and this one you might recognize as one of the many photos from Palestine going on today against the Israeli slaughter. One of the most significant factors is the call for people not to load up ships with war material going to Palestine. And what I'm saying is that when working class struggles link up with social justice struggles, link up with environmental struggles, we have a very powerful possibility there. And if work week is reduced, which should be core to the whole idea of degrowth, then the workplace itself, people who work there should themselves define what their jobs should be and what they should be producing. And what we should—
1 minute, Don, 1 minute.
Okay, great. Okay, we must not accept intensification of labor. I've read multiple articles that say if you work shorter hours, you can produce as much in 32 hours as you can in 40. That's not what degrowth is all about. It's not about having workers work harder at the assembly line. It's not about teachers having 40 students instead of 30. It's not about medical care workers having a patient load of 80 instead of 50. It's about producing each worker producing the same amount per hour, but having fewer hours so we have jobs for everybody. Okay, I have one drawing. My last slide is my favorite perception of people at work, men at work, I'm sorry. And this, why, when I looked at this, I immediately asked the question, why do we work long hours, not spend enough time with our families, get poisoned at work and work overtime so that our neighbors cannot get a job? And it's clearly the corporate rate. Okay.
Please wrap up, Don.
Okay, let me have one last sentence. So, okay, so basically what I'm saying is that degrowth is a working class issue. But unfortunately, many of the scholars of degrowth have forgotten to invite the working class to the working class revolution.
Okay, thank you, Don. That was a very provocative speech. You gave a lot of great ideas and brought in a lot of things that will expand as we go on. I especially want to compliment you for including the issue of militarism. I think the issue is, as a former U.S. Marine who turned around while on active duty, this is something a lot of the left is totally ignoring, the idea of empire and that the U.S. is the global hegemon on that. So we need to incorporate this stuff. So thank you for getting us started. Okay, next up, please, it will be Alice Green. She's a registered nurse. She's a school nurse with the Green Party of Washington State, and she'll cover teaching children to appreciate people more than things. Alice, if you'll go ahead, please do. Alice, I thought I saw you here.
I am here.
Okay, good.
Do I have any slides over there? No?
Oh, give me a sec, I'll get them up.
Okay. It's okay if they're not. It just keeps me on track. I wander. So I'm going to talk about preparing future adults for a changing world because it sounds better than teaching children to appreciate things more than people, but that's basically what I'm talking about. It's about social capital. It's a known determinant of health and longevity in all of the blue zones of the world where people live the longest. They may not have the most production, but they live long, rewarding lives, and social capital can cancel out a lot of other health factors, like even smoking and heart disease and things like that. But in a degrowth economy, it will matter even more for future adults to have social capital. And that means that they will have self-confidence and emotional resilience that comes from within, not from the external things that they can buy or be sold on, their own skill base. It means that they will be able to have a social network that supports them and they'll know how to community build, and they'll know how to work on projects together cooperatively. And it also means that they will experience nature as a commonwealth instead of property ownership being property being owned and land being owned. It will go back to a more baseline indigenous. First of all, we're all indigenous to this planet. It will go back to a more indigenous way of experiencing our relationship with nature as not an over, but as in relationship with nature, and nature as being the commonwealth of the basis for our life existence. So I'm going to go into that a little bit. Is there another slide? So
Yeah.
this is basically a little synopsis of degrowth theory. But we can actually live better lives with less stuff. It really, and the way that our country and the Western countries as such that are very imperialistic measure wealth, the gross domestic product does not measure the well-being of day-to-day people, of working class people and middle class people. When everybody's health is better, everybody's health is better. And mental health wise, could you do the next slide, please? One after that.
Yeah, Doc.
Okay, so coming back from COVID.
Did you call me?
Yeah, I did. I want to let you know that the people are making comments. We've lost almost half of them because we're over capacity. We went over 100 people like 15 minutes ago. Okay. So there's probably another 100 people who like to.
Okay, so capitalism favors the sociopath, and sociopaths don't have the same type of social capital. They have manipulation. Like, imagine somebody who decides to blow something up, and then let somebody, like, for instance, a place called Palestine, send a lot of missiles over there and then rebuild it, but with a payday loan, like we've done with so many global South countries, where let your natural resources be your credit, and just constantly give us those things, and we'll lend you money to fix the things that we helped cause to get blown up. That endless cycle of destruction is really hard on our planet. It's actually the production, not the decreasing of production, not the increase of renewables, that is really going to be pivotal in us turning our global warming situation around. But back to the kids, we are eating our young. I saw kids come back to school so anxious. There's so many kids with like ADHD, and they're so worried about interacting face to face because they spend so much screen time that they don't know how to make friends. And it's really hard for them to relate, and they feel insecure, and they're being given all these messages to have goals. And the language, we need to decolonialize our language, because we don't share time with our kids. We spend time with our kids. We don't, our expressions of things, you owe me, they're very monetary and very punitive and quantifying. What kids really need is confidence and kindness. And in order to have that, we need to model confidence in just everyday things. They need really to not be told that they are their exterior, that we like spending time with them because of who they are, and to hold space and presence for them of just spending that time with them. Their self-concept needs to come from within and radiate out, not be something that they have to look at a screen to reflect on false equivalencies. Well, if you believe this, then you're that, or if you say this, then it must mean you're that. You know, they're their own individual being, and they were born on this earth, and they shouldn't have any borders. We should be helping them to grow, because that is the future problem solvers, and that's evolution in action. So we need to encourage their expansion, but from their own personal qualities and their own ability to exert influence on their world, which is a social capital kind of thing. Who do you know? Who are your friends? Who can you rely on? Who can you trust? Can you trust yourself? Can you trust your own instincts and intuition? And do you have a barometer and a solid foundation to feel comfortable in your own skin, no matter what your skin is, no matter what your size or shape is? We need to allow kids to fail, and that it's not the end of the world. Kids go to jail for things nowadays that they never would have went to jail for before we had prisons for profit. You know, kids made mistakes. Kids have always made mistakes, and that's part of growing, and it shouldn't be the end of the world. So as far as relating to self, they need to feel good about themselves, and we deserve to not quantify them and let them be who they are, and assist their development. With others, they need to learn how to relate to others, and that's not automatic. They kind of need to be taught manners. They need to, not manners in a way like you have to be, you know, fold your napkin a certain way, but manners of listening to the other person and having a conversation, and reciprocity, the whole idea of reciprocity. You don't want to raise kids that are going to have a difficult time in the world because nobody's going to be able to stand to be around them. And you want them to have a friend set, and that's going to help them to develop groups where they can share things. In the future, everybody, you know, like the idea that all the farmers don't need a tractor. If there's a group of farmers that will share their tractor, then they have friends.
1 minute, Alice.
Oh, okay.
1 minute.
All right, last thing, immersive experience in nature. Back to the Commonwealth. They need an emotional connection with their world to feel grounded and feel invested in the future, and that they have a bright future, and being optimistic about their evolution, because they're so much smarter than we are, and they just keep getting smarter. So allowing them the space to find a flow state of something that they're good. And I want to say things about endocrine disrupting chemicals and flow states of meditation and other ways of being, but I'm going to end there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alice. That was very look at things that a lot of times we overlook. And as a professional sociologist, I want to say that the idea of connectivity with other human beings is just so crucial throughout life, not just as young children, but for old people as well. So thank you for bringing these things forward and stuff. Okay, last main speaker that we're going to have today is Stan Cox. Stan is a research associate at the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas. He will describe how rationing can help adults overcome addiction to object possession. So Stan, if you'd like to go ahead and start, please.
Thank you, Tim, and hello, everyone. As Don mentioned earlier, sorry, as Don mentioned earlier, degrowth, and especially if you go back 10 or 15 years ago, degrowth was largely focused on the rich world and very, very much on the radical reduction of material production and not considering very much the bigger picture across the world. Today, it has evolved much more. It started out in Europe in academia, and now that it's being taken up by a much broader swath of the world, it is of course broadened out now to also include for everyone an end to exploitation and sufficiency for all in material access to material goods. Georgios Kallis, by 2018, in his book Degrowth, he listed these characteristics of what he saw as a degrowth future, which, and by that time, were sounding very much like a type of eco-socialism, with land and labor lying outside the economy, with an end of exploitation and radical egalitarianism, with health, education, water, and energy all common pool, treated as common pool resources, localized production, with co-ops and nonprofits dominating the private sector, with resources steered toward the production of basic necessary goods and services and away from superfluous production and especially military production, and direct democracy and care work dominating the economy, care for both humans and nature. And another, in the following year, Timothy Parikh, in this amazing 800-page dissertation that he wrote, and he looked at all the ways that different people in pursuing the degrowth idea, what the three main ways they focused on. One was on the original idea, reducing production and reducing material and energy throughput through society. It's where the word degrowth comes from, not from reducing the gross domestic product, but by ignoring it. Number two, which Don listed a lot of these things, emphasizing the relief that degrowth can provide from overproduction and overconsumption impacts. People in societies that are dominated by the automobile and air travel and advertising are not happy. It's though reducing those will increase happiness. And then the third way is kind of the inverse of that, emphasizing the the future in which well-being, frugality, justice, conviviality, freedom, democracy, direct democracy will be, it's going to be a better world. Now the degrowthers have basically so far have focused on what a degrowth society would look like, because you can't get around to talking about how are we going to achieve it until people can be convinced that it would be a better world than today's. But some of us have been talking about it, one mechanism, fairly narrowly focused, but one example of what needs to be done. And one version of this, which my colleague Larry Edwards and I have called cap and adapt, would, although it's advertised as being focusing on climate, it would trigger a lot of these changes that are needed in a degrowth society, which would be, say, in the United States, to put hard and fast declining caps on the number of barrels of oil, cubic feet of natural gas, tons of coal that come into out of the ground and into society every year, and ratcheting that cap down very rapidly over a fairly short period on about at the same rate that IPCC says that carbon dioxide emissions have to decrease. That would, of course, trigger a lot of changes that would have to be done. The most important being diverting energy resources and indirectly material resources toward producing basic necessities in the country, and away from simply producing for profit and away from overproduction. And that would, and that diversion would become more and more important as this cap on the fossil fuels is decreasing. And that in turn would trigger more necessities, including the necessity with energy resources, especially for in the retail market, rationing of energy resources. And as things progress, the even material resources and rationing luxury consumption, etc., out of existence altogether, but rationing in a way with necessities that guarantees sufficiency for everyone, and in fact would, well, along with price controls and common pool resources, would provide for an increase in well-being for a large part of the population. A similar idea on the international scale is being promoted by the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty movement, which would require rich countries to cap and reduce dramatically over time their use
1
of
minute, Stan.
fossil fuels.
1 minute.
Thanks, Bev. And would direct resources toward the global South for providing, first of all, reparations for past damage from climate change, and for providing non-fossil energy resources, and permit the end of imperialism. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Stan. Appreciate the wide range of comments and thinking on that. All right, what we're going to do now, folks, is that we have a number of speakers that have been working with another number of organizations that have been working with us. We're going to allow them to comment. I'm going to start off with Ann Sheridan, And Ann's a specialist in this, and we're going to listen. She's going to have 5 minutes. Then what we'll do is I'll go down the list that I have, take about 5 sets of comments, and then we'll go back and let the speakers respond to some of the more provocative thoughts, things that can expand the discussion. So Ann Sheridan, if you would go ahead and go, please do so now.
Thanks. And thank you to everyone, all the panelists. I've attended a lot of these talks, and it's always really nice to hear, degrowth is a very expansive, reorienting our economy means changing everything. And so I always like to hear that, people dealing with it, with different aspects of it, and showing that there are different entry points to kind of tackling this subject. But I mostly wanted to talk about so my involvement in a couple of organizations that deal directly with degrowth. So the first one is Degrowth US, which is an organization specifically, it's all volunteer run at the moment, but it specifically was created to promote and advocate for degrowth in the US, which is, people probably, if you're familiar with the concept, you know that it's much more common in Europe, this idea of degrowth, and very nascent in the US. And the US needs to degrow a lot more than probably anywhere else on the planet. So it's very critical that we address this here, and degrowth is doing that primarily through education, because it is still a very new concept. So it holds conferences. It hasn't done an in-person one in a while, but it is done them, and we've done also online conferences, webinars, discussion circles, different things to kind of get the word out. And we're also kind of developing like a policy brief about so what are degrowth policies and what does that look like, and how do we advocate for them, both at the federal and state level. There's also a collection, it's Degrowth US is made up from people that are also working in their either in the local area or at the state level. So there's people from California, Vermont, Indiana, Illinois. I think those are the closest. So we don't have anybody from Missouri or close to where you folks are, and we would absolutely love if people here are interested. I'll put my email in the chat when I'm done, and you can contact me, and I can give you details on how to, maybe we just set up a chat and I can give you details on how to join, but also hear what you're interested in how your ideas about maybe bringing degrowth to your area. And then I'm also involved and help to start the International Degrowth Network. So you probably got the idea that degrowth is a global project and needs global coordination. So this is an attempt to do it. It's a very new organization, just started in August, but is made up from people all over the world. And you can kind of get involved in that way too. And I'll put that website in the chat. And that kind of works there's kind of 2 pieces. One is to represent and grow more local organizations that are working on degrowth and connect them geographically. And then also to look at just how to support the wider degrowth movement. So looking at how to support research, figuring out how to, activism events. There's a circle that looks at how to put degrowth into practice. And there's a few things, how to communicate and discuss degrowth. So there's also looking at it at a very kind of strategic level on the global scale. So those are 2 kind of ways that anyone here can get involved. And like I said, I'll put my email and you can just contact me.
1 minute, Ann.
Well, I'm done. So.
Great. Thank you, Ann. And I think the idea of this degrowth movement spreading out and ways to connect and things like that is important. So please put your email in the chat. Also, want to point out, folks, we have a problem, if you will. We have had so many people that want to join the program that we haven't been able to save all the chat comments. So apparently we hit the limit, and there's people that want to be here in the beyond our technical capacity at this stage. So that's exciting on the hand. All right, let's continue. I'm going to ask Zaki from Universal African Peoples Organization to make a statement. It'll be about 3 minutes, and then we'll keep going like that. Okay, Zaki, if you would, please.
Hey, Kim, can you hear me? This is Don.
Yeah, Don.
Zaki cannot get on because we're over capacity, and we've lost, I'd say, close to half of the people making comments. You know, we're at 100 people. I think about 200 people wanted to join the program, and half of them can't get on.
It's a terrible problem. We're going to have to expand that technological capacity for the next program.
That's right.
Problem to have.
Okay, let's see. Is Penny Hess from the African People's Solidarity Committee on? Penny, speak up. If
Yes, I
okay.
am. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. Uhuru. Uhuru means freedom. Thank you to the Green Party of St. Louis for inviting us on this important program tonight. I want to salute Ajamu, Baraka, Don, Angelica, Barbara, and so many others of our friends from the Green Party here. And of course, I want to salute the heroic people of occupied Palestine who are fighting for their land and liberation from the US-backed settler colonial state of Israel as we speak. My name is Penny Hess, and I am the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. We organize for reparations to the work of the party and the African Liberation Movement. And I salute my leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, fighting for the liberation of Africa and African people everywhere. And some of you here in St. Louis in particular may have seen the beautiful Black Power Blueprint programs on West Florissant in North St. Louis, coordinated by Onezene Yeshitela, the deputy chair of the party, including the basketball court and so much more. This is a struggle for power in the hands of the African working class. And I want everybody to know that Chairman Omali, Jesse Neville, chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and myself are under indictment following the 2022 bogus US government COINTELPRO style attack following the raids on the Uhuru movement. But our voices will not be silenced. And I want to say that the struggle for degrowth, for a better quality of life on this planet, can only come about through the negation of colonial capitalism and the liberation of the colonized under the leadership of the colonized. And I want to invite people to sign up for the Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention, which will be March 9th and 10th. You can go to No More Genocide at eventbrite.com. Uhuru.
Okay, thank you, Penny. All right, is Keith from Attack the System here? Speak up if you're here, Keith. Okay, let's keep going. How about Laura from the California Green Party? Laura Wells?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a lot of planks in the cagreens.org is our website, and the platform webpage has planks on energy, on green science, and on urban land use. And I'll just mention a couple of things, and that is that here in California, one of the things, and across the country and world, that we need to do is to reverse neoliberalism, reverse the privatization of everything, and make it back to where it's public. So there are a lot of people in California working on such things as public power and public banks. If we get the financial system off our backs, that will help a lot. there are a number of things in the platform. I wish I could mention them all, but I'm just going to highlight a couple and keep this really short. And one is to eat lower on the food chain. I'm not sure whether we've mentioned that yet, but that's something that could help a lot in terms of degrowth. And speaking about our next generation and ourselves, one of the things that we can do instead of enjoying the material wealth that we have is to enjoy things like art, music, and dance, which are very environmentally friendly, and bring them back into the schools. They've been dropped out of the schools in a lot of ways in the quest that education is all about jobs. Well, it's not all about jobs. We need art, music, and dance back in the schools and back in our lives, and not just those that earn money from it. And I do want to say that in that regard, in California, I live in Oakland in the San Francisco Bay Area, and some of my favorite uses
1 minute.
favorite uses of military money is that there's a Fort Mason in San Francisco that has been transformed into a venue for theater and art and dance and other non-energy focused events. And there's near me, 10 minutes away, there's a Vets Hall that has a marvelous dance ballroom. And that remains my favorite way of spending military money. Over.
Okay, thank you, Laura. All right, let's see. We'll take one more, and then we'll come back to the speakers and see if they have anything they want to address. But is Miguel or Carla Alexander here from the Community One Project in St. Louis? Or Miguel?
They also texted us and told us they can't get in. There are another people who wanted to comment but can't get into the Zoom.
Okay. Then let's take one more. Is Christian Stahlberg from Degrowth, California, since we'll follow up with the California contingent. Is Christian?
Yes,
Okay.
I am here.
Good. If you'd go ahead, please.
Okay. Well, this is wonderful, and people have covered a lot of ground here. Obviously, it's a big topic. I would like to make two offerings. One is a working definition that I use for degrowth. So let me start with that, and I'm going to read it. Degrowth is a socioeconomic and political philosophy that advocates for a deliberate reduction in economic growth and consumption to achieve ecological sustainability, social justice, and economic resilience. It promotes a reimagining of societal priorities, emphasizing a shift away from a growth-centric model towards one that prioritizes equitable resource distribution, environmental preservation, and the well-being of both people and the planet. Now I'm going to share, I did some work for the United Nations Development Program in Bolivia a few years ago, and I studied the Andean concept of vivir bien, or buen vivir. Let me share that with you. I think it's very informative. Vivir bien has been named as the overarching theme by the plurinational state in its movement forward towards securing the health and well-being of the country, both of its people and ecosystems. We're talking about Bolivia in this case, although it also applies to Ecuador as well. While this ancient relationship has undergone significant erosion since European conquest, it is not altogether lost. Found in both Andean and Amazonian societies, it is about good living together among humans and non-human entities. It is about the rights of people to health, education, and shelter, a new way for improving the quality of life, but not through the possession of material goods as the capitalist way of society is promoting. Improving the relations between persons and also with nature, not being a unique society, but a pluralist society with respect to different cultures, welcoming their participation. To live in harmony with nature which societies did for thousands of years, living within the capacity of ecosystems so as to avoid their destruction, creating a society of equity, participation, and sustainability, love, caring, good community relations, social justice, and equality. I'm complete.
Okay, thank you, Christian. All right, let's go back. I'd like to ask the speakers, I'm going to go through all four, to focus on a couple of things that were that have been brought up that you found particularly thoughtful or you want to comment on. So in other words, rather than try to cover them all, what are the main one or two things that you see? So let's just go in the order and ask Ajamu. Would you like to comment, Ajamu?
Before we start, Kim, is there a time on these? 3
Yeah,
minutes? Thank you.
I'd say 3 minutes,
you.
yeah.
May I ask a question?
Oh, okay, Don.
No, this is Steve Shallon.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, the Green Party's Banking and Monetary Reform Committee was committed to speaking for 3 minutes. Are you going to allow that?
Yeah, we're gonna come back and do that. Yes, but we'll take a few speakers. We'll ask the main speakers if they have any comments, like I just did. Then we'll come back and continue down the list. So everybody will get a chance to speak. Thank you for asking that. Ajamu, are you still here, or have we lost you?
No, I'm here. And
Okay.
I would actually really kind of defer to, going down this list. I mean, there's some very important things that have been raised. I mean, I think one of the issues that needs to be the focus of this conversation, of course, is, the concept of degrowth and what that means in terms of how we build a new society and how we in fact get to the point where we can have an approach to development that does not continue to perpetuate these inhumane and counter human kind of production processes. So I'm really curious to hear the rest of the commentary, but also more importantly, some of the questions that people may have that we can really dig into. Over.
Okay, thank you. All right, Don, now I know you can comment on everything.
Okay, great.
Let's just pick a couple of crucial
Okay, I'm not muted. I can go. One thing, at least a couple of people have mentioned production and consumption as if they're one process. Actually, degrowth should focus on production and pretty much ignore consumption for two reasons. One is if you don't produce it, you can't consume it. So consumption is really a non-issue. The other is, where does the focus of blame? Is it, and what's the solution? Is the solution for individual acts of do-goody, like eating less meat, or is the solution a social solution, like Missouri is plagued by CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations? And I think the focus should be on shutting down CAFOs, and if you shut down CAFOs, you don't have as much meat. That's another issue that I think is very important, is when we say, how do we support the concept of degrowth? We do it in actual work. I mean, in St. Louis, members of the Green Party have gone on the picket line with the striking auto workers. And we should get out of the leaflet saying we want to produce less cars down to zero, but we want to make sure everybody has a job working for 32 hours a week, being able to support themselves. Another thing we can do is, like Penny has pointed out, the solidarity movements that the African People's Socialist Party and their kindred organizations are doing. These social movements are social networking are extremely important. So it is an issue, of working class, power. And I mean, when we're dealing with working class power, I think in giving words of encouragement to auto workers for the concept of fewer hours, and saying, well, what we want as degrowthers is we don't like this idea that if you work 32 hours a week, you should have 25% more exhaustion from your job, which is what the automobile industry has done to working people ever since there's been an automobile industry. They've tried to speed up the line.
1 minute.
Okay, and what they do to teachers, they say, yeah, we'll give you a 4-day work week, and you'll have 10 more students in each one of your classes. We say, no, we support teachers, but we do not support, the increased size of of classes. We do not support the privatization of privatization of schools. It's an absolute awful idea. Everybody should have a neighborhood school. The entire time I was growing up in Houston, Texas, I never got to elementary school in any way other than walking. The entire time I was in middle school, I never got to school any way except riding a bicycle. And so, I mean, we need to build up communities in ways that we can, but let's focus on things that reduce production and not make it feel like you can do individual acts. I mean, we should do individual acts because of our moral perspective, but let's not delude ourselves into thinking that if we all stopped eating meat, somehow meat would disappear from capitalism. Okay, ain't gonna happen. Okay.
Okay, Don, thank you. All right, let's see. Alice, would you like to comment on a couple of things that you've heard, questions that have been raised?
Okay, somebody on the chat was talking about how capitalists frame they frame renewables like a new way to make money, basically. I mean, they're extracting money from that. I think 4 things in my mind that came up out of what people are saying. Going back to healthcare, which is my thing, we need to decouple healthcare from employment, which will allow people the freedom to work less hours to start with. And we need to align labor with banking, with public banking, and allow labor to decrease hours and give labor more power, which will then eventually lead into a universal basic income for everybody all over. Before that, we need to be able to have a mechanism for worker buyouts to form from unions so that there can be worker-owned cooperatives where they actually do own the means of production. Right now, there's no pathway. I've seen many hospitals, many big fish eating the little fish until there's just a couple big fish and it's a monopoly, and it might as well be owned by the public and not be owned by some extractive capitalists. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Don, I just got your phone call. I'll answer in a moment. Stan, would you like to comment on anything that you've heard tonight so far?
Yes. I think some of the big importance of what we're talking about has to do with the situation we currently face when looking at the climate movement. The number of people.
I got it, Don. I'm going to call on it. Thanks.
Oh. And the number of prominent figures in the climate movement who are attacking people who are saying, as we're all saying, that technological developments and markets to address the very narrow issue of carbon dioxide reduction are counterproductive, and there's no way that building up solar and wind capacity and a bunch of electric vehicles and developing artificial intelligence, et cetera, is going to reduce carbon emissions anywhere near where they need to be, much less address all of the other stuff that we're talking about. And then these prominent figures in the climate movement are calling what we're talking about, calling people who are talking about the kind of future we're talking about, calling them doomers. And this is the new sort of climate denial, is people in the climate movement themselves accusing anyone who doesn't go along with their techno capitalist approach to climate being, accusing us of being doomers. I think the more that we have these kind of discussions and draw the public in, the better the chance that we're going to have a future at all.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So we're gonna now Keith from excuse me. Keith from Attack. Just a second, let me slow down. Okay, let's see if I can get this out. Keith from Attack the System was supposed to ask make a statement. He cannot connect auditorily, so he put his comments in the chat. And let's see, it's just a matter of I think it's probably easier if people look at that individually rather than me try to read it. And we're going to continue going on, so each group gets to make their comment, and then, like I say, afterwards we'll open it up and continue the discussion. Okay, is Stephen Showen? I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Is Stephen from Green Party Banking and Monetary Reform Committee? Are you here?
Yes, I'm here and ready to go.
Okay, if you would, please.
Okay, thank you, Kim, and thanks to the panelists for their insightful comments. I'd like to highlight some features of the Green Party's platform. Article 4, Economic Justice and Sustainability states, quote, "Green economics is rooted in ecological economics," close quote. However, unlike mainstream neoclassical economics and environmental economics, ecological economics recognizes that our economy is an open subsystem within Earth's finite ecosystem. This means there are natural limits to growth, beyond which economic and life-sustaining systems could collapse. To avert such disastrous consequences, we must redesign our growth-based economy. We must degrow the extractive economy and grow a human and planet-centered economy until a sustainable equilibrium has been reached among humans and with nature. Some have termed this a steady state economy. In a steady state economy, for example, a stable size of population and material wealth are sustained by a stable flow of natural resources with low resource throughput and low emissions, not overshooting the ability of the earth to replenish human consumption and absorb waste. The engine to driving the growth train is our privatized monetary system, the hidden hand prioritizing profit-making at the expense of people, planet, and peace. The Constitution granted Congress the power to create our money debt-free to pay for the general welfare. Since the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, however, commercial banks create our money from nothing when they make loans at interest. Our money is a form of interest-bearing debt, driving economic growth, inflation, inequality, environmental plunder, political corruption, endless war profiteering, and generating a debt-based economy that funnels wealth and power to the top. Found in the Green Party's platform is a critical initiative known as Greening the Dollar, designed to democratize the money and restore Congress's constitutional authority over currency creation. Based on the NEED Act, introduced into Congress by Dennis Kucinich in 2011, its core principles are: 1, end bank creation of money; 2, restore to Congress the exclusive authority to create the money debt-free and spend it for public purpose; 3, nationalize the Federal Reserve System, now owned by private member commercial banks. This makes our money system a public utility, able to fully fund a truly green New Deal, debt-free, and shape a caring economy to run in balance with the Earth's ability to sustain us. Our sister monetary reform organization, Alliance for Just Money, is planning a march and rally this spring at the Chicago Fed called May Day for Money. It demands the restoration of the money creation power to the People's Congress to produce money.
Time is up. Can you please wrap up?
To produce money for the people and by the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Provocative thoughts there. I'd like to see that developed. Okay, is Randall Toller from the Green Party of Florida here? Randall? Well, I guess he's one that got kicked off. How about Manny Pintado from the Green Party Latinx Committee? Manny, are you here?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I am here.
Good. Go ahead, please.
Manny Pintado from the Green Party Latinx Caucus, co-chair. First of all, I want to say thank you to Ajamu, my man, Dan, Alice, Stan, and to the Missouri Green Party. Hey, it's already 2024. Let's get ready to get somebody to knock out Josh Hawley, okay? So let's do that first for all. Okay, I gotta tell you on this, the word is impolitical, which means that I was just watching a program on PBS on Frontline, how one of those political leaders is destroying the planet and destroying the world. Everybody knows what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing, and he's been doing it because people are letting it doing it. And why? Because of capitalism. Capitalism is destroying our planet. Capitalism is destroying everything that was created. And I don't understand that there's so many ways for us to fight this. And one of the ways is to go and vote for people who really need to have our own principles, who have the priorities of the 99%. This is exactly what you need to do. I mean, right now we have people, leaders, who all they care is about making money and, keeping, what is it? Do they think that the Egyptian empire, that after they die, they're going to be buried with all the goods and everything? No. What they do is they leave it to all the leaders, to youngest leaders, who don't think nothing about just making money. So we need to educate. We need people to say the more that taking from the book that I was reading just a couple weeks ago by Jason Hickel, less is more. Yeah, let's not create more. We need to have what we need, and we need to use natural gas. We need to eliminate
1 minute,
carbon.
please.
We need to eliminate anything that's making fossil fuels and the fossil fuels industry and the nuclear weapons industry. And how do we do this? By taking advantage of what's going to happen in 2024. Many people are going to be losing their seats. A lot of GOP members are leaving Congress. This is the time for the Greens to stop getting people so we can get people in power and people that they care about the 99%. It's about time that we don't say we need to do this. We have to do this. We have to eliminate everything before we destroy our planet. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Manny. All right. We're going to do one more, and then we're going to revert back to our four main speakers. So is Madeline Hoffman from the Green Party of New Jersey here? Madeline? Okay, let's go one more. How about Haig Hovanes? I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from the Green Party of New York. Haig, are you here? You're muted, Haig.
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Well, I'd like to consider the issue from the viewpoint of conflict, because I'm active in the Green Party Peace Action Committee, and unfortunately, resources are a cause of conflict, either through mechanisms of exploitation or sometimes simply over disputes. For example, the South China Sea has undeveloped natural resources. It is the source of livelihood for fishermen, and there are a number of nations that have conflicting claims over the South China Sea. And of course, it's somewhat of a political football, but there is no natural consensus solution here. It's a case of conflicting interests, and the only resolution for it is the law. So what's the law based on? The law right now is largely oriented toward property, which is measured financially. And that's the general difficulty we're facing. All of our allocations are financialized. And as many of the speakers have pointed out, personal welfare and social welfare are less tangible, and not so easily measured. But until there is a better framework and the inertia of the economics community is responsible for this, until we have new metrics, we can't do proper allocation. And allocation has to be done through a legal framework to eliminate conflict. And all this structure has to be built. There is an assumption in the progressive community that we're all on the same wavelength. And if we just sat down together, we would all agree on the same outcomes. It's not the case. There will be conflict in the world. We want it not to be armed conflict. It has to be done in a framework of law, and that requires consensus on allocation decisions, and that requires a new framework of measurement. Over.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you, Haig. An interesting concept. Like you say, most of us don't seem to address the issue of conflict. So I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you. All right, now let's go back to our main speakers, see if they have any comments. Again, folks, we'll just go through the order that you spoke and keep it to 3 minutes. So Ajamu, I got your note that you have to leave at 10 o'clock Central Time. So we're going to take advantage of you here while you're here, brother. Do you have any comments you want to respond to any of these folks that have raised questions or made particular comments? Ajamu? Well, maybe I misunderstood him. Maybe he's already had to drop off. All right, let's go to Don Fitz. Don, I know you've got something to say, so now you got 3 minutes.
Okay, so Ajamu, that was 10 o'clock Eastern time. So yeah, he's right just a few minutes away. A couple of things I wanted to mention is that in St. Louis, when we went to Palestine demonstrations, we carried out flyers that say a central part of what we want to do is to lower, is we want land back for the Palestinian people, and we want to stop the Israeli expansion. And I think it's very important when we go to anti-war demonstrations that if you're in favor of reducing production, it would be very good to have speakers and to have flyers and to have information that says one of the main wars are to allow for capitalist growth. And so when we're marching against this war, we're marching against growth. And so we could really use every opportunity. And the good thing is, being in the United States, you can be certain that every year there'll be a new war coming along, that we can get out the degrowth message. The other thing is something that people can do right now in the chat. Several of us have mentioned aspects of the environment, aspects of production that could be reduced. Can you think of anything which is new, a type of production that none of the speakers have mentioned? Put that into the chat to say what are some more things that are produced in America that are wasteful, destructive, are totally unnecessary. What can we do systematically? And I think this is a good exercise, especially for people who work with students. When I teach environmental psychology, I like to ask students, how are 10 ways that you can keep cool in hot summer days without air conditioning? And people really like to think about different ways that you can keep cool. So let's do that right now. Put in the chat anything you can think of that is a way to reduce production. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, Alice, how about you? You have anything in particular you want to respond to?
I was a little distracted. Decreasing production, I would say we don't need to produce more synthetic fabrics that ultimately end in the ocean. I think what I see is a lot of young people are already getting free stuff and buy nothing groups and going to thrift stores. A lot of people, I would say the people that are really working class and really poverty level, they don't have that big of a footprint because they're already reusing, recycling, reusing the bus. I think it's the people with the private jets where you have the concentration of wealth that are the most problematic. Okay, I'm gonna pass.
Okay, fine, thank you. Stan, how about you? Any comments on this last set of speakers? Anything you want to add? Stan, are you here? Well, he's being awful quiet if it is. Let's go ahead and go on. Continue our speakers. Stan, did you speak up? Okay, we're going to continue on. All right, let's see. Is Barbara Laxon from the Green Party Peace Action Committee here? Barbara? Okay. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Barbara, if
So-
you'd like, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think Hyde spoke pretty well. The biggest thing is the military industrial whatever complex that is responsible for most of our wars and conflicts that are going on to support the gathering of resources and military expenses to line the pockets of the few people that are in control, and in order to have any semblance of sustainability or degrowth or anything of that sort. That one of the first things that we need to do is to severely draw down or eliminate large amounts of the military, especially in this country, you know, throughout the world, but we need to lead because we are the elephant in the room, or however you would like to put it. And that's you know, that will go such a long way if we are not spending money on war. We can spend it on anything we want. This is
Okay,
you know.
thank you. I think, by the way, I'm going to make a comment here, is that I think the concept that we're struggling with on this is empire. And I think that what we have to do is understand the concept of empire. I just wrote something that was published on greennetwork.org about a week ago, a review of Adam Aaron's new book, and where I get into this. So if anybody wants to look at this, I highly recommend it. I think I pulled some stuff together. All right, let's continue on. Is Jerome Bauer from the Green Party of St. Louis here?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Against Techno-ableism is a new book that is not yet available to blind people like me. I've requested the Wilson Library for the Blind and Visually Impaired to make a copy and send it to me, but while I wait for that to arrive, I'm mentally writing my own book against techno-ableism based on my own life experiences so far. We can live better with less technology, even perhaps so-called assistive technology, which too often doesn't work as advertised and is more trouble than it's worth. At least 4 times I've been told something to this effect. Don't you know there's an operation you can get that will straighten out your vision? You can get off the dole and stop being disabled. Sometimes it's an eye transplant or a bionic eye or something. But the insinuation is always that we disabled people are getting away with something, and that there's some technology which would just solve the problem if we have the guts to accept it. How many times have I heard somebody tell me there's an app for that? You can get a free iPhone. We'll give you a free iPhone and train you to use it for assistive technology, but you have to pay for the phone service. And if you don't make proper use of it with a good corporate job, we will send a repo man to take it away. We probably won't, but we will. Right. This actually happened to me. I did have a repo man come. Fortunately, somebody higher up intervened, but they made them
Jerome, 1 minute, Jerome.
maybe taken away. I was told, quote, it's property of the state, unquote.
Okay.
Every time I'm approached by Christian faith healers who offer to give me a healing session to heal my eyes by the power of prayer and the grace of God, I always say yes. And after the session is over, I thank them and I tell them, I don't know if you're going to believe me, but going blind is really not that bad. Take it from me. I've spent most of my life with more or less normal vision, actually pretty good vision. Now I've almost lost it, and it's not that bad. I hope it never happens to any of you, but if it does, you can handle it. With or without so-called assistive technology, which too often doesn't really work as advertised, and it's more trouble than it's worth. It's not
Jerome, your time is up.
a little help from our friends and neighbors.
Yeah. Oh, okay, Jerome.
To
Your
really
time-
do such a thing as a bionic eye or an eye transplant, I'll go for it if Medicaid will pay for it.
Jerome, I'm sorry, we're limited on time, so we're gonna have to go to the next speaker. Thank you for your comments, though. They're important. All right, next up, Elizabeth Fatah from Green Social Thought. Elizabeth? You're muted. You're muted, Elizabeth. There you go.
Right. Yeah, fine. I just wanted, I wanted to talk really a more practical aspect in the sense that how do we get people involved in this? And I belong to the Sierra Club here in San Diego. And last year, actually, Ann Sheridan came and spoke to us on degrowth. And it was very interesting because how some people were really upset about it and, what's going to happen to my job kind of thing. And I think that it's important that we get out into the community and talk about degrowth. For example, the Sierra Club has a committee on zero waste, and talking about that and trying to get the city of San Diego to eliminate some of the waste. For example, when you go and pick up your food that you've ordered, you don't take the plastic utensils. That, for example, you have a sign, sometimes I've seen it, say utensils will not be given unless you ask for them. Or to change the kind of containers that you get your food in. So if people can make, I guess, an idea or make a reference that this is part of degrowth. And actually, one other thing I mentioned is that the degrowth committee had a gathering in one of the parks where they had retired I guess mechanical engineers and even dressmakers, so that people could come, and if they had a broken toaster or some other, maybe even a
1 minute, Elizabeth, 1 minute.
Finish, yeah, right. They could bring it there and it would be fixed free of charge. Now, this was a very small thing, but doing things like that and getting involved in other groups. For example, Nature now has an article on degrowth. And I think this is the way to go, that to get people to understand it and not be frightened of degrowth. And I guess that's the end of my, one more thing, and that is green social thought. Many of these articles and ideas that you have seen, and we rather have heard, it is on our webpage, Green Social Thought. And that's where you can get a lot of information, people who are listening here. And that's my final comment. Thank you.
That the URL for Green Social Thought, by the way, is greensocialthought.org. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, is Anna Schiefelbein, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Is Anna here from the Illinois Green Party? Okay, I don't see her responding. So how about Maureen Doyle from the Massachusetts Green Rainbow Party? Maureen, are you here?
Oh, yep, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'm in the Massachusetts Green Party, the GRP.
Wait a minute, you need to speak. You need to speak into your microphone, Maureen.
Oh, I thought I was.
There you are now. Okay.
Oh, okay. And I'm also on Eco Action, and I'm so glad to hear about degrowth because it really gives me hope because the recent COP28 talks were such a mess. So this gives me hope that we can do degrowth because I mean our collective carbon footprint is huge and is really making a mess of things. So thank you for doing this.
Okay, welcome. Thank you. All right, how about Paul Lehman from the Missouri Green Party? Is Paul here?
Yes, I am.
Okay, if you'd go ahead, please.
I just wanted to comment on a group that is using legal methods to challenge some of the atrocities of the fossil fuel industry and of the chemical manufacturers, and that is Earth Justice. Some of you may have heard of that. What attracts me to that is that they're actually doing something and not just lobbying for action to take place. And they've won lawsuits against the fossil fuel companies for the things they've done. There are three areas that they work in is preserving biodiversity, protecting our health, and advancing clean energy. And under the advancing clean energy, I agree with all of these approaches and all the lawsuits that they have levied against these various institutions, like challenging Indonesia's coal-dependent electricity plan. They do that through legal means. So the one thing that I'm composing a letter to them about is their item, building the grid needed for 100% clean energy future. The problem with this particular one, which is the only one I have a problem with, is that they have adopted the capitalist model instead of so they want to build infrastructure for clean energy to attach to and move that energy around to where it's needed. And the problem I have with that is that someone's going to make money on this, and the people who are building these
1 minute, Paul. 1 minute.
The people building these interstate power lines, that is more toxic to the environment than local production of energy. So I'll communicate that to them.
Okay, and thank you, Paul. All right, and is Jesse Neville from the Uhuru Solidarity Movement here? Is Jesse here? Okay, I'm not seeing him. All right, so let's go back to our original speakers. We will again ask them to speak for 3 minutes. Ajamu apparently is gone for the evening, unfortunately, but we've still got Don and Alice and Stan. We'll have comments from them. Then I'm going to have a quick consult with my technical guy, Joe, on how to do this. But the intention is to then open it up to everybody else, and that we'll proceed with that. So let's get the comments first, and then I need a comment with a quick comment with Joe, and then we'll go on to continue. Apparently, as long as a good majority, if not all of you want to stay on. So let's see. So Don, would you like to comment to any of these last set of speakers that we've had?
Well, yeah, these are comments in general. I want to point out that clean and renewable energy is neither. The clean renewable energy is not clean because it's all based on fossil fuels. That's what builds the energy grid, whatever it is. And it's not renewable. The only thing which, just because the sun's there forever doesn't mean that the machines that gather the solar power are there forever. So the phrase of clean renewable energy is a contradiction in terms. I also want to point out that something that hasn't been mentioned tonight, I think is very important to remember, is that the congressional bills of Bernie Sanders and the squad in the Democratic Party do absolutely nothing to reduce fossil fuels. They do not place a cap on fossil fuels. They just base it on people's assumption that if you use more solar energy and more wind energy, therefore you're going to use less fossil fuel energy. And that's totally false. What happens is that all of these supposed Green New Deal bills, what they do is just add alternative energy onto the fossil fuel energy. Basically what they're doing is the calls for the Green New Deal are a call for the most massive increase in production the world has ever seen. It would be totally, totally destructive. And I would just say that looking to the Democratic Party to restrict overproduction is sort of like asking the KKK to end racism. It doesn't work.
Nice analogy. Okay, thank you. Alice, would you like to comment on any of these final round of speakers?
I think to Elizabeth and Maureen and Paul in different ways, I feel that the rights of nature, we have to really incorporate into ourselves that we are part of nature and give ourselves the grace to start where we are, because everybody wants to know, where do I start? It's really going to come from inside of people. It is not in the external power structure. It is not going to be a patriarchal, sorry guys, like capitalist, imperialist solution. It's going to be organic, and it's part of evolution, and we'll either get there kicking and screaming and maybe going extinct, or we'll walk there gracefully. And I think changing people's minds and really reviving the idea of the Commonwealth, that when one of us succeeds, we all succeed, when none of us are free till all of us is free. And instilling that in young people know that instinctively, and they feel bad because they're not measuring up to what society is telling them they should want. And we need to tell them that it's okay to follow what is inside of them. And I'll end there.
Okay, thank you. And Stan, do you have any comments on the final set of speakers? Stan here, or is he dropped off? Well, since he's in India and they're like 12 or 13 hours difference from us, we can understand he might have a different timeline. All right, thank you all. This has been very provocative. Now, I want to take a second. I want to consult with Joe here, and then we'll open it up to the floor. Joe, can you tell me how people indicate that they want to speak? Is it the reaction button that they push?
Yeah, I would do the reaction button, and I'll put in the chat directly to you, like in order as I see them. And there's more than one screen, so I'll try my best to go back and forth.
Okay, so give me guidance if I don't see something here. Let's speak up. All right, so what I'd like to do now, folks, is open it up to everyone else. We're gonna limit comments to say like 2 minutes. But I'd like you to, you're welcome to bring new ideas in. You're welcome to respond to previous speakers. but I think we've done very well, being very respectful to one another. So let's expand this up and hear from especially those of you who haven't spoken tonight. So if you, down at the bottom of your screen, you kind of to the right-hand side, there's a thing that says reactions. If you click on that, that lets me know you're there and want to speak. I will call on you in order. When you finish, would you please put your hand down, because this is complicated enough trying to keep up with everybody else. So we'll just go in the order, and like I say, I think we'll start with 2 minutes and see how that works. Okay, so I see Mike Nickerson. Mike, you have 2 minutes to go ahead and communicate.
Okay, well, I won't take 2 minutes. I just want to add a simple a meme to the discussion that, you know, we're trying to figure out. A lot of people are wondering where to start. And if you just think about more fun and less stuff, the things that we can do with life, they've been mentioned several times. The potentials of being, you know, relating and learning and all these things are non-impactful on the environment, and the material things are. So if we aim for more fun and less stuff, then we're on the right track, and we can become more sophisticated from there. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Paul Lehman, you've got 2 minutes, please.
I had a question, mainly, I guess, directed at Don. He raised the issue, or others have too, that we need to bike more, walk more, and need to be able to walk to work and that kind of thing. But how do we get around our country? Would you address that in a particular way of how do we move people from one side of the country to the other, and from one side of the world to the other, in a sustainable green energy way?
Okay, Don, you want to respond to that?
Sure. The slogan that I like is the best energy is less energy. The only truly environmental energy is less energy. And so I think the answer of how you get from one side of the world to the other environmentally is to do less of that. And the way to move from one part of the country to the other is to do less of that. You know, historically, people have lived most of their lives within 50 to 100 miles of where they were born. And so there's absolutely zero need, you know, to go, you know, thousands of miles every year. You know, visiting Europe or visiting, you know, Africa is something people should, you know, should value as an extremely good thing to do once every 10 or 15 years, you know, not something to do every year. And so I think that local travel is, you know, probably the most environmental form of travel.
1 minute.
Okay, Rachel I guess it's Broughton. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, it's Broughton.
Okay, thank you.
So my my question is, I was wondering if there might be 1 or 2 people who might be willing to respond. I would like to hear people's successes. So if you have organized a program that was within the degrowth mindset, I'd like to hear what the process was that you went through to get that going, and see if I can try to emulate it here.
Great question. Does anybody want to speak on that? Hit reactions, if you will, or just speak up, perhaps is easiest. Has anybody organized something on this?
I could say something.
Okay, Alice.
Okay, I don't know if you can.
Yeah,
Oh.
Barbara's on, you went mute.
Oh, go ahead.
Wait a minute. Alice has the floor, please.
Oh, I have a simple thing that is called story time, where every month a group of people gets together, the host picks the theme, and everybody just tells a personal story related to that theme. It could be, you know, getting lost somewhere unfamiliar. It could be any kind of thing. But what comes out of people is really interesting, and it's sort of a bonding thing. And it does create community. You do feel more connected to these people. And I do feel that social capital is really undervalued in our society, and it's extremely important for all of us to connect with each other in non-threatening, kind of comfortable ways. Yeah, I don't have anything other than that. I have a friend who is a sewing circle person who goes to the homeless shelter and sews people's clothing that has ripped and things like that. So.
Okay, thank you. Anne, you want to comment?
Yeah, so just quickly on that question, I think, you know, again, we need to do things at the policy production level, as Don has told us again and again, a spot on. And I would say that one project is, I don't know if it's called this across the country, but in California, it's called community choice aggregation. Just like an annoying term, but it's basically like getting away from our local investor-owned utility system. And so that there's a couple of ways to do that. And I think, but that here in San Diego, that was the first step, is to have this. So you can look it up, community choice aggregation, which will produce more. It's nonprofit. So it's in their like bylaws to produce as much renewable energy as, San Diego Gas and Electric doesn't care about that. And now the next step is to actually move it completely to, so that's where they work with the investor-owned utility.
1 minute.
Yeah, sorry, it's actually kind of complicated, but I would say that's the practical project that I would start in my community. Yeah.
Okay, I'll comment. I just recently reviewed Adam Aaron's new book called The Climate Crisis, and he's a professor at University of California, San Diego, who has been doing a lot of work on getting the University of California to quit using renewables. So it might be worthwhile to look at his book, Rachel, and see. It's called The Climate Crisis. It's by Adam Aaron, Aron. And
I know him. Yeah, no, he works a lot. He's out collecting signatures for community power to do that. So
okay. He's this one that I know. All right, Don or Barbara, you want to comment? I see your hands up. Paul, excuse me, I'll get to you in just a second.
Yeah, I have an example of just a neighborhood community-based activity or party. My friend Erin is very much into upcycling and reusing, and she would host parties where everybody would bring their clothes that they didn't wear anymore. And we just piled them on the dining room table and we just all went through them. It was a clothing exchange. And we had cookies and tea and talked to each other. It was very fun, and everybody left with new clothes that were actually somebody else's old clothes. So I guess, and I'll say this quickly, my question, that's just a small example. And I think what Anne was talking about was a larger example of how to intersect with these bigger systems. And I do think that these, like Erin's party, I think those are really important, not just for recycling clothes, but to get people to think.
1 minute, Barb.
What, Don? I don't know. Don's tapping his head. I don't know.
That's from one of Aaron's parties.
What is?
The hat.
Okay. I'm done. I do want to say, and I'll say this quickly, it's disturbing. I see hope because I see young people, as somebody else had spoken of earlier, going to Goodwill for clothes, not buying new things. I think the generations below ours, I think there are more people less interested in accumulating wealth and objects. On the other hand, it's very concerning when I see what's happening with the privatization of Medicare
and the privatization of public schools. These are like big system changes that are very concerning. So I think we have to work at every level, I guess, is my takeaway.
Okay. All right, Paul, let me get back to you. My apologies there.
I just want to point out a couple things that I'm not in a, I can't seem to organize any people who share my interests. So when I have the opportunity, I use the influence that I have. An example, I helped organize a retirement party for our choral director in Columbia, Missouri. And I insisted that we have use real knives and forks and spoons and wash them, and I volunteered to do that, and also to use glass containers that were recyclable. There's lots of there's plastic out there now that is recyclable, and that's made out of plant-based materials. So whenever I have a chance, when I'm doing something, these are things that I can do to, it hasn't had any impact on my family, but maybe some people are touched by some of these examples, these modeling.
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else want to respond to Rachel about active organizing? I'll say a couple of things. One of the things is part of the thing that we're seeing is an abject failure of leadership by governmental, corporate leaders, even social leaders like religious leaders or union leaders and things like that. It's important that each of us, to whatever ability we have, is that we try to reach out and speak about these issues. And one of the things that people seem to overlook is their library system. Most of the libraries in our cities will have speakers programs and stuff like that. I just got asked to, I live in Northwest Indiana. I just got asked to speak at the Hammond Library's Earth Day program. And I'm going to bring in a lot of these because we're not getting, and it's not just the traditional idiots, like governmental leaders and stuff like that, but it's also the media is not allowing these issues to be discussed. They're ignoring this stuff. So to me, we've got to get out any way possible to let people know, to raise these things. I mean, I think tonight's forum has been quite useful to get it, but we need to start working on a much larger level. So I'd encourage you all to use any opportunity to speak, to write to local newspapers, things like this, to try to find ways to bring people together. All right, I will stop there. Any other comments? Anybody want to speak, particularly anybody that has not spoken? Well, let's see. Well, then let's come back to, I'll give you a minute to think about this. I'll ask Don if he wants to sort of have anything to sort of wrap us up. And then we'll go to Alice, and then we'll have an open front round. And if we have conversation, we can continue. If nobody has anything they want to say, I think we should call it an evening. So Don, you want to kind of wrap things up or give us the last couple of minutes of your knowledge and wisdom and want to share? You're muted, Don.
Yeah, it always helps if you unmute. Okay. Yeah, I'm just very concerned about many of the recent comments about individual actions because the individual actions that people can take are a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you want to do something that prefigures the sort of society that you want to create. In other words, if you live one way and preach an opposite way, there's something very disturbing about that, and people can't take you seriously. On the other hand, if you're doing something which is dealing with a small group of people, like exchanging clothes, or like I ride the bicycle to the store, it's not going to make capitalism come down because I ride my bicycle to the store. And so it's double-edged, because on the one hand, you can, when you do this and work with other people, you're building a solidarity network, which is very, very good. But on the other hand, you're simultaneously encouraging people to participate in something which does not challenge the system. And ultimately, if you don't challenge the system, you really accomplish. Okay, I got to tell a story that I hope I can fit into 1 minute. When I was working at State Hospital, I wanted to form an environmental committee. The only thing that they would let me do was to have a committee that focused on white paper recycling, because you use a lot of paper in a mental hospital. So I trained people on how to use how to recycle white paper, and we were going to give it all to the to an animal cruelty group that would use it for so animals could have something to sleep on. Well, I went by and had it all set up with all sorts of different departments to do white paper recycling. And then I checked on it a year later, and the guy said, "Oh yeah, we're doing that." And I said, "Where does white paper go?" He says, "Oh, I just dump it in to the rest of the trash, because the animal cruelty places wouldn't take it anymore, because they said the animals really like shredded newspaper and not shredded white office paper." And I said, "Well, why do you do it if it doesn't accomplish anything?" And he said, "Well, it makes people feel like they're doing something useful." And so sometimes I get the impression that the entire environmental movement is focusing on things that get people to have fuzzy, wuzzy, warm feelings, and that can actually be a block to social action. There's good psychological research that says that as a result of doing a good deed in a laboratory, then you're less likely when you leave to actually do something meaningful the day after. So I think people need to do this, but be very, very careful. You need to advocate and promote systemic change.
Okay, thank you, Donna. I think it's an important part. Alice, do you have anything else you want to say? You're muted. You're still muted, Alice. Alice.
Okay.
There we
I
go.
believe that little things do mean a lot and do have a ripple effect. And it may not seem like the little things matter, but somebody sees you ride your bike. Somebody sees that it does consciousness. And I think consciousness is a sea change from underneath. It comes from the grassroots. It's not coming from above. We're never going to force it from above. It's a natural evolution. And you do have to be the change that you want to see. And you are important and you matter, and the little changes you make, they resonate with the world at large. And that's a phenomenological way of looking at it, but life is a phenomenon and we're all in it and we should be making the best of it. That's all I got to say. Thank you all so much for participating. I had no idea so many people would be interested in this topic. This is awesome.
It is awesome. Before I close it out, I want to ask one more round. Does anybody have anything they want to add before we call it a night, or should we just wrap it up? So speak now. Paul Lehman, you want to try again?
Yes, I just wanted to suggest that this webinar be repeated, so that those 100 people that didn't get on, would expand our capacity and redo this, and maybe vary as far as speakers and that kind of thing, but make it slightly different, but on the same topic.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Rachel, is your hand up a new time, or you just forget to put it down?
No, I re-raised it.
Okay, please go ahead.
I've heard people say in the past that we should work for systemic change. And I find myself wondering, what does that mean in action? Because I feel like in order to create systemic change, that's a really big problem. And like creating throwing a retirement party where you insist on using real forks is something that's actually attainable. You know, anyone could just put their foot back down and say, you know what, for my kids' graduation party, I'm gonna make sure that we have, you know, whether it's compostable or, you know, anyone can choose to actually do that. So if you want, you know, to talk about systemic change, what are the steps? You know, like how it's just like more of these kind of meetings. Like it just seems so big.
It is really big, but imagine all you had to do was wash the forks. You didn't go to the dollar store to buy plastic forks. You didn't spend an extra 15 minutes at work to make the money to pay for the forks. There wasn't all the plastic packaging that you had to have one of those receipts with the toxic ink in it that you brought home with you. That it's like a little thing, but it kind of means a lot. And the more people that just relax, wait a minute, I'm not going to go out and buy forks. I got forks right here. We really like, we go on this hamster wheel that we don't even realize we're on. And I'm just going to say again, little things mean a lot.
Anybody else? I would just like to kind of address this at the end that Don brought up and others have responded. I don't think it's an either or thing. We can make individual change, but I think Don is absolutely right. We need to change the system, because one of the things that came out, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's a UN agency. They are the leading environmentalists in the world as far as what we need to do. They suggested that if we're going to keep the increase in Earth's temperature to 1.5 degrees centigrade or less, that we have to cut emissions by, I believe it's 40% of what they were in 2010. Well, that would take them down to about 20, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but 21 million tons of emissions a day. Right now in 2022, we emitted something like 51 million tons. So we've got to address these bigger issues. We cannot just rely on the individual stuff. We've got to make this systematic change. But I also think it's also anything you can do in your own life is moving in a good way, building networks and things like that. So it's not an either or, it's sort of both and, but it's immediately. All right. One last time, any last comments, any last thoughts? Okay, Christina Mann.
Yes, I agree with Don, because we've also, the Green Party's had a couple of transportation webinars, and we've had three groups of people that have been working consistently on establishing either further public transit in their city, like Pittsburgh, or they're striving to save Black and brown communities from being destroyed, from adding more highway lanes in Houston and Austin. So, and plus on the alternative websites on YouTube, there are many more programs such as Active Towns, Strong Towns, that are all absorbing this.
1 minute.
Absorbing this better public transit kind of thing. So I agree. I think that we should be targeting the bigger coalitions and keep forming and forming those types of things.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Well, it looks like we've reached a point where for most of us that we're sort of taking in a lot. We've had tremendous speakers. I want to thank Ajamu. I want to thank Don, Stan, and Alice for their comments, their provocative thinking. I want to thank you for listening and responding. I hope that we can do this again with much more technological capability. It's fascinating to see so many people want to do part of this. So I want to thank each of you for participating, for listening, to thinking. We need to keep pushing this stuff as far as we can. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, following Elizabeth, about the website at greensocialthought.org. Don and I are also associated with that, and we've been trying to carry out these discussions. Please look at the website. There are many other things. Let's share our resources. Let's think how we can go forward, how we can do things in our community, but link up with people around the world. This is a global issue. We cannot look at it just as a United States issue. It is a global issue. We need to think about the world. I particularly want to think, I don't think it was put out quite as clearly as I would like it, but I think the idea that Ajamu brought out right at the beginning, now it was phrased as the rich countries versus poor countries. I think a better way to approach that is imperial countries versus formerly colonized countries. But this is stuff we can talk about in future webinars. I want to thank everybody for participating, for listening well, and look forward to seeing you all back, as well as all your friends on all your networks. I'd like to see, oh, Barbara wants to say something before we call it off. Barbara, you want to go ahead? You're muted. You're muted, Barbara.
Hey, Kim.
I didn't have my hand up. I was just waving to everybody.
Okay.
Hey, Kim, it was great facilitation.
Well, thank you. I tried.
You as a professional moderator, we're going to double your salary next time.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
All right. Well, thank everybody for participating. Have a good night. Happy 2024. Let's make it a better year than the last one, especially in these damn wars. All right. Thank you all. And we'll call it quits now. And best to everybody. All right. Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.
Let's all go make a donation to the Green Party right now.
A good idea.
Let's go fund that thing. Okay, bye.
Okay. Thank you. Good night, all.